beginning of a beautiful love. At the age of 16, she met him in the small town where they both grew up. They were two dreamers, young and full of life. Their connection was immediate. She had always felt different, but when they met, it felt like he was the missing piece she had been searching for. They spent endless days laughing, talking about their hopes, and imagining a future together. It was a kind of love that every teenager dreams of, pure and untainted. But as time went by, life had other plans. She left for university in another city, while he stayed behind in their hometown. Despite the distance, they promised to keep in touch and make it work. The years went by, and they both started their lives apart. She threw herself into her studies and personal growth, while he stayed behind, but not without facing his own challenges. He met new people, made new friends, and slowly started dating again. He had several relationships with other women, but none of them ever compared to the love he once shared with her. Every relationship felt shallow, incomplete, and he couldn't escape the memory of the girl he had left behind. She, on the other hand, remained true to the love she once had for him. She never looked at anyone else, believing in the possibility of a future with him. As they grew older, they both changed in different ways. She began to find herself in a deeper connection with God. At university, she became involved in a church community, where her faith grew stronger every day. She started to see the world through a different lens, learning to value herself and her worth in a way she hadn't before. He, however, continued to struggle with his past. The relationships he'd had were never fulfilling, and the pain of his childhood never truly left him. He became increasingly distant from the idea of love, focusing instead on living for himself. His heart hardened, and his beliefs became more cynical. 6 years later, they bumped into each other on a busy street in the city where she had once lived. It felt like a dream, yet there they were, standing in front of each other as if no time had passed. But things had changed. The deep connection they once shared was still there, but it felt different. He had seen the world, dated other women, and had lived a life that left scars on his heart. She, on the other hand, had blossomed spiritually, but still carried the love she had for him in her heart. The chemistry was undeniable, but they were not the same people. They tried to reconnect, but it wasn't the same as before. She, now a Christian, struggled with the fact that her love for him was so deep, yet the man before her was not the same person she had known. He was distant, his heart closed off by the pain and brokenness of his past. He wasn't the sweet, loving boy she had fallen in love with. She knew that being with him again would not be easy, especially since he wasn't aligned with her faith. She wrestled with her feelings, questioning whether it was worth pursuing a relationship with him, knowing that it could lead her away from the path she was now on. Despite the tension, one night, after a heartfelt conversation, they gave into their feelings. They were together again, but it felt like a mistake. She had crossed a line that she swore she would never cross again. She had sinned against God. The guilt was overwhelming. As much as she loved him, there was a part of her that knew that this wasn't the right path. Their love had always been pure, but now it felt tainted. It wasn't the love they had once shared, and it certainly wasn't the love that God had intended for her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had compromised her faith for the sake of a fleeting moment of happiness. The guilt weighed heavily on her heart, and after much prayer and reflection, she knew she had to let go. She couldn't continue in a relationship that was leading her away from God. She needed to focus on her faith, on the person she was becoming, and the future that God had for her. They parted ways once again, this time with a deeper sense of pain. She chose to trust God with her heart, believing that if he wanted them to be together, he would make it happen in his perfect time. She decided to remain single, guarding her heart for her future husband, trusting that God had a plan for her. As the months passed, they both went on separate journeys of healing. She continued to grow in her faith, dedicating herself to her studies and her relationship with God. She prayed for him, asking God to heal his broken heart and show him the way. He, in his own time, began to reflect on the relationship they once had. He started to realize how much he had changed and how much he missed the person he used to be. Slowly, the walls around his heart began to come down. God began working in his life, changing him from the inside out. 1 year later, they crossed paths again. This time, something had changed within them both. They were no longer the same people who had once loved each other with a reckless passion. They were now more mature, wiser, and most importantly, closer to God. They began to talk again, slowly rebuilding their friendship. Their connection was still there, but now it was rooted in something much deeper, trust in God's timing. They had both healed from their past, and although they still cared for each other, they knew that it was no longer about them. It was about what God had planned for their lives. As they continued to rebuild their friendship, they both realized that sometimes letting go is the best thing we can do. By surrendering their love and their desires to God, they had found peace. She had trusted in His plan, and through that trust, she had found strength. He had been healed, and now, both of their hearts were in the right place. They were no longer driven by their own desires, but by a deep faith in God's will. If it was His plan for them to be together, it would happen. And if not, they both knew that God had something even better in store for them. In the end, they both learned that God's timing is always perfect. Sometimes we have to let go of what we want to allow room for His plan to unfold in the best way possible. This story of love, heartache, faith, and restoration is a testament to the power of trusting in God's will, no matter how difficult the journey may be.